Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. With this video series, I will be analyzing and discussing Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden, one chapter at a time. Unlike my crafting videos, these videos will offer general criticisms and advice without taking a deep dive into the changes and modifications I would make for my story and group, as that campaign is still forthcoming. A warning before we begin these videos, obviously full of spoilers for DMs only. If you are playing Rime of the Frostmaiden or plan on playing it, please do not watch these videos, but you can come back to after the fact or tell your DM to pop in and check them out. This video, we will be covering Chapter 5, Oriel's Abode. Oriel. To get used to pronouncing Oriel and not... Blizzard ruined me because they've got Oriel as a Diablo character, so I keep wanting to say Oriel. So, Chapter 5 may be the one I think actually needs the most amount of work. Obviously, chapters 1 and 2 are very daunting to cover, but it's because they give you so much to work with that it's more about you eliminating some stuff and kind of picking and choosing what you want to work with and how you want to put the threads together to get to Sunblight, basically, and the end of the first part of Rime of the Frostmaiden, which I think ends with Sunblight and then Destruction's Light. Chapter 5 is, in theory, part 2 of 3, if you're including the 3 kind of separate storylines, which we're going to try to bring together. And unfortunately, the whole thing is told in one chapter and basically one area, which means the players just go to the Island of Solstice, go to the Dungeon of Grimskala, beat up Oriel, and possibly end the Eternal Winter right then and there. Or their main goal, which is odd that becomes suddenly the main quest, is to actually get an item from that dungeon, and then they can open the way to the final part of this main quest. Now, the problem I have is that I don't think the players should know where Oriel's lair is right off the bat. I think what's missing here is the precursor. So it's like if we just jumped right into traveling to Sunblight all of a sudden and just took on the Dwerger. Like, we know Oriel's a problem. We don't have to necessarily introduce that yet. But it feels like there are missing steps in this quest chain. So I think the easiest way to fix that, let's go to the Icewind Dale map, is to have it so Valin, which is the main NPC quest giver for basically the rest of the campaign once you get to Destruction's Light onward, have her not know where Oriel's lair is, and her Professor Orb has been stolen, and perhaps some of the other Arcane Brotherhood members do know, or maybe it's literally a puzzle combination where they only know part of the information, you have to go visit the other ones, which would be a great excuse to visit Dazan in the Lost Spire dungeon, if we haven't covered that already. Go find Nas Lantamir, who doesn't have to be in the Island of Solstice. She can be literally anywhere. She's dead, doesn't matter. She could be you could use any of the other dungeons. You could use just a random, like, whatever you want to use. You can just put her somewhere, or have it be a fun little mystery tracking thing where you have to figure out where she went. You have to track her down. You know, hey, did you see this person? Go to a town, literally follow the steps, turn it into to where you're having to chase that person down. And then, of course, the big twist is that she's been, killed. Maybe there's an ice troll standing over her, whatever. You can use something, or, put her in the cackling chasm or something that maybe she fell and Knowles ate her body, or whatever you want to use. It can be, there's stuff in here you could use. And a great excuse to go to Revel's End to talk to Valish Gaunt, who is another Arcane Brotherhood member. It'd be really, really fun if the players needed to talk to him to gain some key piece of information. Maybe for some reason he's the only one who knows where Oriel's lair is, but he's gone insane from the information. Maybe he was touched by, Oriel or a blizzard or something, and he's kind of in, like, and turn Revel's End into like Arkham Asylum or something cool, and you have to go in, and then of course just there's a breakout or something crazy happens. That's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about that should lead up to the moments, the precursor to before you actually realize, okay, now we know where we need to go, which is the Island of Solstice, this cool snowflake-shaped island that represents her lair out in the Sea of Moving Ice. And then we have options on how to get there. We can either use Ankajuk, the Awakened Whale, to charter a cool, like, bubble whale ship over there. We could take a ship out of Revel's End. They could steal a ship out of there. They could hire a captain. They could do whatever, it costs money. Or you could even introduce, if you want to keep all that away, and introduce another plot thread for the players to have to cover in this section of the book, hey, the Goliaths over at Sky Tower Shelter have griffins. We could fly over and not even screw around with the Sea of Moving Ice, because that's a terrifying place to even have to use a boat or an awakened whale in. And we could just fly there with our cool griffins if we solve the whole Goliath problem. So now we're adding in all these different steps and things, which I think pulling from chapter 1 and 2 in these later events, even post Destruction's Light, is a great thing to do. Just be aware that it's going to make less sense to cover some of them because ostensibly 10 towns has been destroyed, or mostly destroyed, because of the whole Shardland Dragon thing. So it's going to be weird to get like any kind of side quest. Instead, it becomes a quest, a kind of a part of the main quest at that point. But it's cool if you can break it up. If you know, we need to go see these 3 people and also track this person down, and then your players can do those out of order. This is all kind of the stuff I'm thinking of doing. I haven't had any of this stuff, you know, completely planned out yet, which is part of the joy of being in like pre-production mode. But I would definitely add more content to chapter 5 because it just feels like you're rushing ahead all the way to the climax and actually getting to the Island of Solstice, which we can cover now. So once you've gotten there, then we can get back to the actual book. So I've mentioned I'm probably going to put Nast Lantamir somewhere else beforehand, rather than being here on Grimskala in the Island of Solstice. By the way, the map you're looking at, obviously I'm using Roll20 here. This little path that leads right to Grimskala is on the hidden GM layer. They do not see this path automatically, which is a key because you could use this to explore a bit. And in fact, as much as we definitely don't want to do a hex crawl for Icewind Dale, I think travel time is a lot easier, even though you could use, I mean, depending on how much of a survival horror you want to go, you can certainly have it be, you know, oppressive and cold, but rules as written in the book, as long as people are wearing like warm clothing, which everybody would be, you don't have to make any kind of extreme cold checks or anything like that normally while you're in Icewind Dale. I think that should all change when you get here, because this represents Oriel's main layer, and it should be a fucking million times colder here, and suddenly your players are going to be dealing with like blizzards and extreme cold situations and monstrous forces. Like, this place should be dangerous. Don't make it a hex crawl slog or anything. In fact, I don't know how far this map, if it's to scale. So you can see, you know, 1,000 feet here, another 1,500 feet, another 1,200 feet to get to Grimskala if they follow basically the shortest path they could get there, because I believe you can't really crawl up necessarily on the side. Maybe you could. And I would use a kind of fog of war system here. Again, if we're using Roll20, don't just show them this whole map, maybe. Show them, you know, a little bit of a circle kind of around their area and make it so there's a creepy like fog around them and they have to travel like that. And I don't know how much your players are going to want to explore this area. I mean, there's an ice method they can meet fairly early on that kind of explains, you know, about the area. And Wizards loves to do that. Just kind of pop up an NPC that can tell you about. It's like a guided tour. Like there's shipwrecks all around the island, but I can't imagine, especially if you use my idea of making this place a lot more difficult and challenging because of a regional effect, kind of like a boss, you know, has, you know, layer actions and regional effects. Use that regional effect thing here. Maybe I would throw one shipwreck in like nearby where they can see it, and then if they want to explore it, have that ready, be a whole map, and have there be, you know, treasure and monsters and stuff in there as a kind of a little side mini dungeon. That's something I would do rather than, in other words, quality over quantity when it comes to the shipwreck stuff. Create a whole little mini dungeon there if you want. You know, you can use that same Dark Duchess map. In fact, I think that could probably work well. In fact, if they haven't done the Dark Duchess yet, okay, you could probably do that here too. And then note about different areas, like there's some frozen statues around the area where if they jack with it, I believe Oriel shows up and can curse them into having cold vulnerability. There's Yetis all over the place. I would definitely use Yetis. Basically, you should treat this as the boss's domain, even though her actual dungeon is in Grimskala, but make it so this is the survival horror, like overland travel area that Icewind Dale is not, because I don't want to turn all of Icewind Dale and all of the campaign into that. But this one area, I think, could work really, really well to make it more challenging and to where your players are like, oh god, we got to get in and get out because this is really difficult stuff. And it has the added benefit of weakening your players by the time they get to Grimskala, because they'll probably be, again, if you've added all those extra steps as I'm advising, then we're going to scale up the adventure to where instead of being, I believe they're level 7 by the time they get here, they may actually be even higher level. Maybe even closer to the end of Tier 2 by the time they get to Grimskala, and then we can go completely Tier 3 into the final part with Caves of Hunger and Ithrin. So, Grimskala, which is a cool name and a cool design. It's a giant, like, skull. This looks like something out of He-Man. This is a pretty cool dungeon. I like the tests that are involved. I like some of the NPCs, but the big thing here is, of course, the boss fight, potential boss fight with Oriel that we need to be aware of. First of all, the biggest change I would make, here's the entrance right here. This dude right here, Urtgard, is so cool. He's an old man frost giant. He's got like cataracts. He's just a senior citizen through and through. And he's the last surviving member of the Frost Giants who actually lived here before Oriel took it over. And now he works for her, basically. Although all he wants is an honorable death, and he knows things about the dungeon. That is an awesome NPC. I love a old man Frost Giant who's going to have a hilarious old man voice. He's going to want to fight the players. He's going to demand that they fight him honorably and give him a proper death. But he can also tell the players about, kind of how this dungeon works and what they can kind of find to expect here. I would 100% use him and not use the goofy-ass animated walrus who's ice skating on the ice rink in the lower level. So this dude, put him not in his own little room guarding his own little treasure chest. Make him a marquee NPC and put him out in front. I'd put him right at the entrance and greet the players as soon as they walk in. And that kind of set the tone of this dungeon. Be like, yeah, it's dangerous, but also, there's chances to role play and socialize for sure. There's an interesting choice where you could, if you wanted to, seal off either the bottom temporarily or the top temporarily if you wanted to guide your players into one section or the other. For example, maybe you want your players to grab the codicil first, and then by grabbing it, that's what summons Oriel. And you could do the boss fight in the kind of ice rink area, maybe at G10. Or maybe you want your players to fight Oriel first, in which case have these stairs be hidden and have them only be able to go upstairs, which leads to the palace level. And she literally has a throne room. You could fight her there. This map's unfortunately a 10-foot scale map. That's why all the tokens are teeny tiny. I love the icicle piercers though. It's really cool. You could have them fight Oriel here, or what's recommended is probably at the top where the rock is. You can probably smell what this rock's cooking. The rock, by the way, is... you need to look twice at this thing's stat block, because I've never used one in D&D before, and they're just big birds. I mean, they are basically big birds. But also, it's CR 11, and it can attack twice with an average of plus 13. It does 20 to 30 damage, and when it's talons, it can grapple you with a DC 19, and it has a fly speed of 120 feet. So that is more than enough. Granted, it's probably taking some opportunity attacks, but it's got 250 hit points. It can take them. So it's going to grab somebody, and it's going to fly away. And it's going to just fly away, because nobody's going to catch it. Now, if we're scaling this up, your players might have some tools of downing this thing. Maybe they've got a gust of wind or something they can do. I don't know if there's a specific certain spell. Obviously, like a paralyze, hypnotic pattern would do well to down this flying creature. If they don't do that, they could be in some serious trouble, because I forget how high this actual battlement is, but even if the rock just picks a player up and drops them right then and there, that's outside of the dungeon, like you're out of combat for a long time. But the most efficient thing for this thing to do is to pick somebody up, fly, what was it, maybe 1,000 feet or something, and that's however many turns it can go. If it dashes, it can do 240 feet in a turn, and it's going to drop them in the sea of ice. That player's dead. So, running this combat encounter could be very challenging. And obviously, if you want to challenge your players, Rock plus Oriel is definitely the way to go. Or you could do just Rock, you could do just Oriel. There's a lot of different combinations of boss fight you could do here, and they have some serious consequences. And it even mentions in the text, oddly enough, Oriel alone can't do the permanent winter thing. She literally has to, which I guess she's a minor deity. In my campaign, she'll be a little bit something else, but she has to ride this giant bird in order to actually cast the spell. She has to be in the sky doing it. So just by defeating the rock, you've actually basically saved the day. You've stopped winter, or you've stopped winter from being permanently on, and without even having to face Oriel. So there's a weird consequence there, although, obviously as a DM, you could change that and say, well, it's okay, you defeated the rock, but that still just slows her down. She can find a new one or something. So, be careful about using this, and realize, this alone could be a suitable boss fight if you don't want them to fight Oriel at all. It might be a little disappointing, however, if you make it all the way to the boss's lair and never fight Oriel. I will go ahead and say that what I'm planning on doing is having the players... I haven't decided about the rock yet, to be honest. but I'm planning on having the players fight Oriel's first form, and afterwards she becomes the actual main quest giver after that, and she will explain the situation of how she is linked to Ithrin, and basically kind of demand the players then work for her, which could be a situation where if the Rock gets involved and the players actually get their asses kicked, instead of killing them, Oriel will then use them as her like main agents to go infiltrate Ithrin and take care of that business. Because I think linking all these different plot threads together is a key to making this campaign flow smoothly. So we'll definitely get into that. Obviously watch my crafting series for my plans on how to link that stuff better together. But she's got multiple forms, so that's something you can play with. You can just you can still have them fight Oriel's first form, which is pretty solid. I think it's more melee focused than her second form. I should have had these open to begin with. It's the one that's actually on the cover of the book. CR9. She can toss. She can use Ice Storm, Chromatic Orb. She's got Legendary Resistance. I mean, she's a pretty solid boss fight, except for the hit points is not great. She could actually be bursted down. And AZ13 is not great either. So be aware that you could still use her here, have them defeat. You don't. In other words, you don't have to go through the multiple boss stages. You can have them defeated it and have her defeat her first or even second form, and then Valen or somebody can mention the fact that she's defeated temporarily and can reform, and then you can still use her. And she can show up in Ithrin to either fight the players or make sure they're doing their job or whatever you want to use. So that's certainly there. The actual basement, as I mentioned, has a goofy-ass awakened walrus who can just ice skates up to them on this rink and talks to the players. I am very against all the awakened animal stuff in this whole campaign. I think it's really dumb and silly, and the Frost Druids don't really have a good plot thread of themselves. Unless you want to expand on that, go for it, but it doesn't really work for me. And we've already got that awesome Frost Giant who can be that NPC that kind of talks to the players, tells them what's going on, gives them the backstory of the Frost Giants, can especially tell them about this area up here, which is where the, I believe, former Frost Giant Queen resides, and the players can fight their way back there and retrieve her Berserker Axe as a magic item. So otherwise, the main thing down here is the 4 tests, and in order to gain access to the Codicil of White, which is the special MacGuffin, the actual rhyme of the Frostmaiden, that will crack open the glacier and allow the players to get in and essentially do the rest of the campaign. So it's a very important item if you're running this as written. They have to first pass these tests. I forget if they all have to pass them. I think only some of them have to pass them, and it only opens the doors for some of them. The tests are, for the most part, they get teleported to different camps, all these nomad camps, and it's not like a dream sequence. It's a real, like, you're actually being teleported there, and you have to go through, and all these tests represent different aspects of winter, and they're all pretty harsh. There's literally like cruelty, perseverance, and endurance. Like, it's just, they're not meant to be like necessarily morally good. Here's the morally good choice. There's a lot of these don't have good choices. It's like, can you basically make the difficult choice? In fact, it's like being in a post-apocalyptic scenario. Like, can you make the hard choices? So I think these all make pretty effective social encounters. I would not, put the players on a battle map or use that Rega, nomad map or anything like that. I would just go through and, have some pictures pop up and explain the situation and see how your players react. And if combat decides to happen, then obviously have a map prepared for that. And I believe one of them you do end up fighting like giant vultures or something as part of one of the events. But otherwise, I think it should go pretty much as written. I think they could be good social exercises, and there's not, there are right and wrong answers, but I don't think your players necessarily need to lock themselves out of getting the Codicil. The other thing you could change, and something I was leaning towards, is have it be where your players actually have to retrieve the Codicil from somewhere else, again, as part of those steps before they even get to the Island of Solstice, and then their goal is to actually return the Codicil, and maybe you could make that be the reason why Oriel has been doing all this terribleness, because her precious artifact has been stolen from somebody. Maybe Nas Lantamir stole it. And you could have it be the players actually have to return it, but in order to unlock the way to even return the Codicil, they have to then pass all these tests, and then you have to have some other reason to, and then you could just have Oriel herself gladly, not gladly, but accept the Codicil back from the players, and then maybe she could open the way to Ithrin in the Caves of Hunger. So those are different ways you could alter this from happening, but I think I would keep a lot of this dungeon as written. but the difficult thing is how you want to time the Oriole rock fight, and how you want to run that Oriole rock fight could be very, very challenging, given that a rock can just pick somebody up and fly them the hell away and drop them somewhere else. And that could be one thing if you want to bring that fight in Oriole's favor, and if you don't, then you can eliminate the rock. But it's something to keep track of. I would eliminate the Awakened Walrus. I would definitely keep the Frost Giant, the old man Frost Giant, as your main like dungeon concierge. She's really fun, and I think this should serve as the basically as the climax to part 2, and should feed into the remainder of the campaign adventure, which is, by the way, the real big bad is that hidden city under the glacier. And seeing as how you, and I'm speaking as Oriole now, seeing as you all came in here, were able to even fight me, fight your way in here, you've tested yourselves successfully. Now you're going to become my agents and go into this, the glacier, and open the way with my blessing. You could even, have them be blessed by the Frostmaiden, and in order to complete the rest of the campaign. And then she becomes a really cool kind of twist quest giver. And then if you wanted to, you could still have her show up later in the campaign, as I think she shows up as an Ethrin random encounter, but obviously you want to make that a scripted encounter as much as possible. So those are the changes I would make for Chapter 5, the biggest one being insert more content. I would not have your players just, after Destruction's Light, immediately have Valen say, okay, I know exactly where we need to go solve this whole problem. Like, it seems way too easy. It's way too railroady and linear. Insert some more steps in there. I like the idea of having your players have to learn where the actual layer is, as well as recovering the Professor Orb. Use the Arcane Brotherhood. Use the fact that they're all separated. Maybe they have to go talk to Avarice in the Knights of the Black Sword, and like I said, Dazan and the Lost Spire, Valish Gaunt at Revel's End, and maybe they have to track down Nas Lantamir, and then the big twist is that she was killed, and maybe whatever killed her actually stole the Professor Orb, and these are all different things I would insert there. And then finally, after doing that, then they've learned how to get to the Island of Solstice, and then this becomes your Sunblight for Chapter 1. And then after this is complete, we pretty much have a more railroady linear section for the finale, but it's a lot bigger. It's way more content. I mean, the Caves of Hunger, as we'll see in my next video, is a giant mega dungeon, and that just leads to the next area. Like, it's a huge area. So I would be okay with having the finale be mostly just these areas that kind of go in order, but there's so much going on there. There's a lot of content that I think that fits out part 3 very well, which is why I think this part 2, which is just Chapter 5, really needs the most amount of help and work. So I think that will do it for this video. If you're watching this week, then everybody have a wonderful, happy holidays, and we'll see you next week on how I tackle Chapter 6, The Caves of Hunger.